Andrew, please tell us about yourself.
My name is Andrew Work. I'm Canadian. I've been in Hong Kong for almost 21 years. And I like to say this is my favorite Canadian city because there's over 300,000 Canadians in Hong Kong. And, it's a great place to be a Canadian, frankly. I went to University of Victoria, got in their MBA program because they guaranteed they would send me to Asia. They didn't tell me that they wouldn't take me back. So I ended up here because a girl that I met in the program, I was in Malaysia, she came to Hong Kong, so I came here to be with her. And that girl is now a woman and my wife, and we have 2 daughters.
Was she from Hong Kong?
Family was originally from Zhongshan.
From Canton in Guangzhou?
You bet. And her family went to Canada in 1980 and settled in Vancouver. So I met her at the University of Victoria MBA program, and we named our first daughter Victoria. Well, I came for the love of the woman, but I stay for the love of the city. Hong Kong is an exciting, dynamic city. I mean, every minute you're here, you feel like something exciting is happening. And it makes it a wonderful place to be.
So can you tell us briefly about your early days in Hong Kong?
Yeah, I got here just young and wild and crazy, a young man having an adventure, in love with a beautiful woman, and stuck around, and things happen and life came on. Things for me kind of changed when I hit the 7-year mark in Hong Kong.
Why did it change?
7 years is when you qualify to get your permanent residence in Hong Kong. And, without taking the next step to become a full Chinese national or Chinese citizen, that's kind of, full Hong Kong style citizenship. You can vote, and it really changes. You realize at that point, you're like, wow, this really is my home.
So as the president of the Canadian Club and a former executive director of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong, there's so many Canadians in Hong Kong. What makes Hong Kong so attractive to so many Canadian professionals out there?
I think it's attractive for Canadians and people from all over the world. Like the French population has doubled in the last 5 years, even more. And it's because this city is so dynamic. So many Canadians come here because they get here, they've heard about it from people like me.
Right.
And it's so easy to start a business. It's so easy, to feel the excitement of the city. It's a compact city. Everything happens at like double, triple speed. So the kind of people Hong Kong attracts are people that just want to go, go, go.
Right.
And a lot of Canadians have that in them. Some of them can do that in Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal, but a lot of them want to do it here.
What is the Canadian expats community here like? What is it, a tight-knit community?
Yeah, so there's over 300,000 people, and a lot of them aren't really expats. A lot of them, of course, are Canadians that have roots in Hong Kong.
Right.
Were from here and went to Canada, became full Canadian, came back.
Right.
So, for example, when the Vancouver Canucks made the playoffs a few years ago, I remember going to watch the game with my 2 daughters, right, in the morning, because, the time zones. And there's like 300 people in this restaurant. And I know the owner, and he said, how many people you got? What's your maximum on the fire code? And he's like, 250. I'm like, how many people you got? He goes, well over 300. All Chinese. All Chinese Canadians, head-to-toe Vancouver Canucks gear, having beers at 7 o'clock in the morning because they're watching the Canucks. And
so hockey really brings Canadians together.
Hockey brings Canadians together. Whenever the Olympics are on, there's massive gatherings. We took over Lockhart Road. There were like 20 bars, jam-packed with Canadians to watch the gold medal round when it was being played in Vancouver. It was just fantastic. Hockey brings Canadians together, but there's 25 different alumni groups here.
Right.
Canadian Chamber, Canadian Club. There's many Canadian schools running Canadian curriculum. There's just a huge, really, community here, and it's got lots of different communities within that because there's so many.
Right. So as a businessman and entrepreneur, was it easy for you to start your businesses here in Hong Kong than back in Canada?
It's funny because I came here and I was still finishing my MBA, so I never started a business in Canada. But my favorite story is when I started one business back in 2004 when I started a free market think tank. I remember going into the company registry.
Right.
And doing an application and handing it in. And I said, can I get a rush on this because I'm getting on a plane and going on a flight.
Right.
And he says, can you write a letter? I'm like, really? How long is that going to take? He hands me a piece of paper and he says, no, write a letter. So I wrote it right there. Can I please get this faster and sign it? And he says, wait here. Comes back, he says, come back at 3 o'clock, we'll have it sorted. Boom, company, set up.
Efficiency.
Efficient. It was really, and I remember how he said it. He was like, Mr. Work, would 3 o'clock be acceptable? I was like, yeah, that's very acceptable.
Well, and I've also learned from my research that while you're working on your international business and entrepreneurship degree at the University of Victoria, you spent 1 semester in Kaohsiung, Taiwan. So what did you take away from that whole experience?
Wow, you really did do your research. Kaohsiung in 1995. It was really, people would stop and stare at you in the street like they'd never seen a foreigner before.
Right.
Young men generally are not allowed to leave the island without special permission until after they do their military service. So they're not. They hadn't, at that point, they hadn't gotten. I think it's different now. But yeah, it was really exciting. You'd walk around, people would give you free food in the streets just because you were walking around. Nobody spoke English.
Right.
As soon as you stepped off campus, nobody spoke English. You really had to pile in with your Putonghua.
So why Taiwan?
At that time, they were having the first really free parliamentary elections, and I wanted to see Chinese democracy in action. So I chose to go to Taiwan and see just how they were, because I was involved in politics in Canada.
Right.
So I wanted to see how they were running the election and how people were campaigning and what it looked like when people had their first real elections. It was really exciting.
Did that whole experience impact your life?
Yeah, I think I did. I mean, it was really, at first I was just excited to be there.
Right.
And realize that, in Canada, we have a well-established democracy and it has traditions and people understand how the system works, but there, anything went,
Right.
And I remember walking down the street one day with a couple other Canadian guys who were on campus, and we're walking down the street and there's a big pile of fireworks in the middle of the street, just sitting there. And we're like, what's this all about? So we're like, looking around, nobody seems to be paying attention, so we pick it up, we're like, cool, fireworks. Go down the street, there's more. We're like, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden down the street, we're bam, 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 bam. And we look down the street and we see a guy and he's coming and he's running along and he's lighting the fireworks. And we're standing there holding all his fireworks. We're like, oh, sorry. So we put him down, and then the fireworks were announcing candidates coming on the back of a truck.
All right.
Yelling out, vote number 2, vote number 2. And that was Taiwanese campaigning.
So it was a way for them to make the announcement in public.
Yeah, and get everybody's attention. And, we'd never seen anything like that. So it was really exciting.
So it was an eye-opening experience for a young guy.
Yeah, and I think for me, going to Taiwan, seeing it happen in Taiwan for the first time, sometimes you hear people say things like, oh, democracy is not appropriate for Chinese culture. Taiwanese have got it worked out pretty well, and they're doing a good job of it. And that was one of the big things I learned there.
And as somebody who's been living here for 21 years, there's so many expats in Hong Kong, and they're usually, some of them, they choose to live in their own little circle.
Sure.
What are the pros and cons of living in a semi-closed circle that way?
Well, the beauty of Hong Kong, a couple of things. Number one is you can step in and out of those circles whenever you want. So if I want to go watch some hockey with a bunch of Canadians, I can do that here.
Right.
Right. But if I really want to get involved in Hong Kong, you can do that too. It might be the only country in Asia where you can go there and really become part of the fabric of the city.
Right.
Right. Hong Kong people still welcome that. You stay. You do your time, right? And you see leaders like Alan Zeman's a great example of somebody who came from Canada and is really a part of the city.
From Montreal.
Originally, yeah, from Montreal. Came here, he replicated a little bit of Montreal when he created Lang Kwai Fong. It's very much the style of St. Catherine Street or Saint Laurent. So, guys like that are really part of the heart and soul and Hong Kongers are proud of. Only in Asia, only in Hong Kong can you do that.
You're a man who wears many hats. You're the current editor-in-chief at Harbour Times. You co-host The Back Chat with Hugh at RTHK Radio 3. From time to time, and you MC so many different events around the city. And has this doer's mentality always been a part of your makeup? And how do you keep it intact when times are rough?
Yeah, you just keep moving forward. I mean, and I've always been like that since high school. And, Hong Kong's the kind of city where people are always looking for people who can get things done. And so once you're visible in that role, people just kind of come out and say, hey, can you help with this? Can you help with that? And in this city, whenever possible, you should say yes. There's just so much happening.
So there's no way to say no?
Sometimes it feels like that, yeah. But really, you just got to move forward. And when times are tough, you just got to double down.
Okay.
And Hong Kong's been through some tough times. The great thing about Hong Kong is that the tough times don't last here.
Why so?
Well, you never see a recession last more than a year in Hong Kong, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think the economic freedom in Hong Kong means that people have the flexibility to kind of give up the old thing and move on to the new thing, right? In other places, recessions last for years and years, but here they seem to go really quickly. And it's that nimbleness, that flexibility that Hong Kong has.
Is that the reason why you decide to stay here? One of the reasons?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm deeply entrenched in the community here. My roots now, after 21 years, they go pretty deep in Hong Kong.
Right.
But there's always this excitement, and as long as there's still a place for people like me in Hong Kong, I'm going to want to be here.
Like you said, you're deeply entrenched in the city. Yeah. So I've checked out your Twitter profile.
Okay.
And you said you're a Hong Konger.
Yeah.
And as somebody who's been living here for 21 years, how did you make your Canadian education and skills learned in Canada transferable to the work and life here in Hong Kong initially?
Well, I was pretty fortunate to have been born in Canada, which has a great education system. I was lucky enough to get into some really good schools at university, like McGill University in Montreal and then University of Victoria. My parents, supported me through all that. So I was quite fortunate, and you just bring that into everyday life. McGill, quite rigorous, teaches you how to think, but it was also a kind of an adventure place. Montreal is a city for adventure. McGill's an adventure school. I got to go to Barbados, go out and chase animals in the forest, doing biology. And University of Victoria, they had that program in place to send me off. Kaohsiung, Malaysia, that was all made possible with the University of Victoria. So that education really got me off to the best possible start in life.
You've been here for so many years. You've been working really hard, and you are a very successful individual in the city. Can you share with us one or two of your most memorable setbacks after your move to Hong Kong?
Memorable setbacks. Let's see. Okay. So I was heavily involved in the dot-com boom, 1999, 2000, 2001, and then I was running exhibitions in the dot-com space, and when that crash came, I mean, everybody at my company got fired, and everybody was wiped out. And it was like, oh, what do we do now? So that was when I started a business, and that business did not go well. It was a big disaster. Every time somebody brings it up, it's like, oh man, what a disaster. But you learn things, and you just, like I said, you just got to keep moving. And that was a time when, it took a while to kind of give that up, right? And then get my head straight and move on to the next thing. That's when after that, I founded the think tank, which did go well.
Right. So as a self-starter, having a support network is really important. And how did you build up your support network initially?
Well, building up my initial support network, Hong Kong's a great place for networking. It's so easy.
Why is it so easy? There's so many people here, and everybody seems so busy, though.
Yeah, but people in Hong Kong, they love networking. Okay. I mean, the Hong Kong handshake, everybody's always got a business card, two hands, boom, and everybody gives them out and says, hey, call me. In the expat community in particular, people are like, hey, call me. I was young and crazy and came here like you. Give me a call. I don't know you, but I'll give you a shot. I think the other really important thing is to have backup, and my wife has always been in my corner. I mean, it's great. And we, sometimes she tries something new, and I'm the backup, and sometimes I'm trying something new, and she's there. And I mean, having that kind of support, you cannot beat it. I mean, that's the best.
So for young Canadians who would like to make it big in Hong Kong like you did, what are some of the advice you can give them?
It's funny because I see some people do come here, and some people do struggle in Hong Kong.
Is it much tougher nowadays to make it big in Hong Kong?
I think it is a little bit tougher in Hong Kong because the language skills needs are different. Like Putonghua is more important than it was in English. English is still very important. It's hard to get good people who speak native English. There's still a role for that. But it's more important now to speak Putonghua to get better jobs. But it's still a brilliant place to come out and network like crazy. The city's small, it's compact, it's cheap and easy to get around, transport's efficient. You can do 10 meetings in a day, and you can go to a happy hour or networking event and meet 20 people in a night. I mean, only in Hong Kong. You talk to people in places like Toronto, Vancouver, it takes them an hour and a half to get home. They got to drive to the suburbs. Everybody knocks off work at 5 and goes home. Hong Kong, no way. We kind of knock off work at 7 or 8 and then go network.
But don't you feel tired, though? How do you balance your life and work?
Yeah, it's a high-energy city. If you're the kind of person who wants to show up at work at 9, go home at 5, forget it. Hong Kong is not for you. You got to be,
Right.
Yeah.
And you're very involved in different local communities. And I wrote a piece that you wrote about the Canadian International School in Hong Kong a few years ago. So what prompted you to write that article?
Well, I was on the board, and there was a bit of a kerfuffle there about the governance. And the reason for that is that people feel strongly about the Canadian identity and what it means. And Canadian values are expressed not just in things like raising a flag, but also in things like governance, right? And how we organize ourselves as people and how we reflect Canadian values in our institutions. And that's quite important. And so there was a lot of that in that debate. And so, yeah, so that's was kind of the motivator for myself and a lot of other people.
So what didn't they do right back in the day?
There was a sense that, kind of the culture was changing, and I think the concern, one of the beautiful things about it is that the admission system was very egalitarian, and there was concern that some of the governance was changing, and so, they were not going to be accepting people on merit and issues like that, but, some of that kind of uneven treatment.
There's a lot of mainland invasion.
Well, yeah, that would be one way of putting it. Was that there was concerns about that kind of culture and influence getting into the admissions process, that people were trying to influence it, basically to put themselves in a position to do favors. And I mean, that was something people were concerned about, and it was affecting how teachers were being managed, and, there was a lot of concern about that.
So how do you think we can preserve or promote Canadian values and culture in Hong Kong?
Yeah, we're doing the talk here in front of John Robert Osborne, who died defending his comrades in World War II in Hong Kong as part of the Winnipeg Grenadiers, jumping on a grenade. I think there has to be a little bit of that kind of selflessness when you step into these issues. But I think it's about keeping it clean, right? Being transparent about how you operate. I think these are important Canadian values.
Is there an advantage of being Canadian in Hong Kong? Do Hong Kong people respect Canadian a little bit more?
Yeah, maybe, but I mean, there's a huge familiarity there. Like, there's not a day that doesn't go by when I don't see somebody walking around wearing something from Canada, a T-shirt, a sweatshirt, and we see that because so many people have family there. They have connections to Canada. I'm talking to some guy on the bus this morning, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I've been to Canada because I have relatives in Vancouver." I'm like, "Hey, who doesn't?" Everybody in the city, it seems like, has relatives in Canada. So people know Canada, and they feel comfortable with it, and have generally a good impression.
So we're standing in front of the John Osborne statue here in Hong Kong, a Canadian who made a historical impact on a city. Personally speaking, what do you want to inspire? What do you want people who have met you to remember you by?
What do I want them to remember me by? Being a nice, a friendly, open person, always willing to help. I mean, and that's part of the Canadian spirit. We're having the 150th anniversary of Canada this year.
This year, yeah.
Yeah, and
are you going back to Canada to celebrate that?
I will probably be going back in about a month for a little bit of business here and there. We're talking about taking the kids back, maybe go to Ottawa, the capital for Canada Day, the big 150. It's going to be a heck of a party. We were there last summer, and it's really, this year we're talking about Canadian values. It's not just, it's just not just waving a flag. It's like saying, if we're going to have special events and kind of tag it with the 150th birthday, what does that mean? What do we want to tell people? And it's about Canada being a welcoming, open place, being a diverse place, being multicultural. And these are the kind of things that we want to communicate to the rest of the world. I think Hong Kongers know that, again, because they can look at their own family living in Canada and being successful and welcome there.
So in short, how would you like to summarize your Hong Kong story?
Yeah, I mean, Hong Kong is a place, it's like you're always riding a cresting wave. You're always riding a wave, but it's not like a little gentle wave. It's like a wave breaking on the west coast of Vancouver Island coming off the Pacific. It's an exciting place to be. And as long as you can keep your balance, you're just going to keep moving forward, and it's a heck of a ride.
All right. Thank you so much, Andrew, for this interview.